The orphan's golden eyes had always made the other children uncomfortable. They would whisper when Kai walked past, their voices carrying words like cursed and unnatural. The matrons of the Terran colony's orphanage had grown accustomed to his peculiar appearance, dismissing it as a rare genetic mutation, nothing more than a curiosity in humanity's expanding genetic diversity. But the Galactic Council's xenobiologist, Dr. Vexithan, knew better. The Zephyrian scientist had been conducting routine genetic screenings on the Outer Rim colonies when he first laid eyes on the 17-year-old human. Those golden irises weren't just unusual, they were impossible. In all his centuries of studying various species across the galaxy, he had seen such eyes only once before, and that was in the ancient archives describing the long-extinct progenitor race. Fascinating, Dr. Vexthon muttered, his tentacles writhing with excitement as he reviewed Kai's blood sample results. The DNA markers were unmistakable. This wasn't just human genetic material, it was something far more significant. The progenitors had been the first spacefaring civilization, the architects of the hyperspace lanes that connected distant worlds, and the creators of the quantum consciousness technology that allowed instant communication across galaxies. They had vanished mysteriously 3 million years ago, leaving behind only ruins and legends. Most species believed them to be mythical, but Dr. Vexthan had spent his career proving otherwise. And now, he was staring at proof that they hadn't simply vanished. They had interbred. The implications were staggering. If this human child carried progenitor genes, he might possess abilities that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Or worse, from the Council's perspective, he might pose a threat to the established order that had kept humanity firmly in check as a junior species. Dr. Vexthan immediately transmitted his findings to the Council chambers on Nexus Prime, where the 5 dominant species maintained their grip on galactic affairs. Humans, despite their recent technological achievements, were barely tolerated members. Useful for their adaptability and breeding rate, but certainly not considered equals to the ancient Valorians, the psychic Mentari, or the technologically superior mechanoids. The Council's emergency session was brief but decisive. They would retrieve the boy quietly, study him, and determine how to contain this potential disruption to galactic stability. But they had underestimated both human stubbornness and the awakening power within Kai's veins. When the Council's enforcement ships arrived at the colony, Kai was in the middle of his daily maintenance work on the colony's fusion generators. He had always been unusually good with technology. Machines seemed to respond to his touch in ways that baffled the engineers. What he didn't know was that this wasn't mechanical aptitude. It was progenitor tech bonding, a psychic interface ability that allowed direct communication with quantum-based systems. The moment the enforcement officer's neural dampeners targeted him, something ancient awakened in his consciousness. The golden glow in his eyes intensified, and suddenly every piece of technology in the colony began responding to his emotional state. Lights flickered, computer systems rerouted their operations, and the colony's defensive grid, dormant for decades, began powering up. And "Stand down, human," barked Commander Throck, a massive Valorian whose species had ruled through military might for millennia. "You will come with us for scientific evaluation." Kai's fear transformed into something else, a deep, resonant anger that seemed to echo from somewhere beyond his own mind. Through his heightened awareness, he could suddenly perceive the quantum threads that connected all technology around him, the same network his ancestors had built to span the galaxy. "No," he said simply, and the word carried power that made the enforcement officer step back. The colony's communication array, long limited to local transmissions, suddenly burst to life with progenitor-level capabilities. In an instant, Kai's voice reached every human settlement across the galaxy, every ship, every outpost. "My name is Kai." His voice echoed through quantum space, "and I am not alone." What the Council had failed to realize was that the progenitor genes weren't unique to one human. They had been quietly spreading through humanity's population for generations, dormant until triggered by sufficient stress or threat. Across the galaxy, golden eyes began to glow as thousands of humans felt the awakening call. the quantum consciousness network that the progenitors had built didn't recognize species boundaries or political authorities. It recognized only one thing: the genetic markers of its creators. And those markers were scattered throughout humanity like seeds waiting for the right moment to bloom. On Nexus Prime, the council chambers erupted in panic as human colonies across the galaxy began exhibiting impossible technological capabilities. Ships that should have taken weeks to travel between systems were arriving in days. Planets that had been struggling with outdated terraforming equipment were suddenly thriving with landscapes that seemed to reshape themselves. Dr. Vexthon watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of scientific fascination and existential dread. His discovery had been meant to help the Council maintain control, but instead he had awakened something that would fundamentally shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Back on the colony, Kai stood surrounded by humming machinery that now responded to his thoughts as naturally as his own limbs. The enforcement officers had retreated to their ships, unsure how to proceed against an enemy who could turn their own technology against them. The progenitors didn't disappear, Kai said, his voice carrying across quantum space to his newly awakened kin. They evolved. They became us. And now, we remember who we really are. The age of humanity's subservience was over. The golden eyes that had once marked Kai as an outcast now blazed with the light of a species reclaiming its birthright among the stars. The Council had sought to contain a single anomaly, but they had instead unleashed the return of the galaxy's true inheritors. And in the vast networks of quantum consciousness that spanned the cosmos, ancient protocols began activating, welcoming their children home.